Captain Elias Thorne leaned back in his chair, the worn leather creaking under his frame as the holographic display flickered before the assembled delegates. The chamber aboard the Galactic Concorde's neutral station hummed with tension, air recyclers whispering like distant ghosts. Around the vast circular table, representatives from a dozen species eyed each other warily, tentacled Vexari coiling their limbs, the crystalline Sangari refracting light into rainbows of impatience. Elias, the lone human envoy, felt the weight of their stares, but his jaw set firm, calloused hands folded on the table. The debate had dragged on for hours, voices rising in a cacophony of translated barbs. Delegate Crix of the insectoid Zorith clicked his mandibles sharply. Your species' expansion into the nebula fringe endangers the migration paths of 1,000 worlds. We demand retraction, now. His compound eyes gleamed under the chamber's sterile lights, segmented body shifting with agitation. Beside Elias, Ambassador Lena Voss, his sharp-tongued second, tapped her stylus against her datapad. She was the cautious one, always calculating angles, her dark hair pulled into a practical bun that matched her no-nonsense demeanor. "Captain, they're pushing hard," she murmured, voice low enough to evade the universal translators. "If we concede on the mining outposts, it sets a precedent. But fighting this could isolate us." Elias nodded subtly, his blue eyes scanning the room. He'd captained freighters through asteroid storms and negotiated with pirate syndicates. This political minefield was just another hazard. The external challenge loomed large. The Zorith claimed human mining rigs disrupted their sacred spore clouds, vital for their hive reproduction. Lose the outposts and Earth's fledgling colony network starved for rare elements. Push back and the Concorde might sanction humanity into oblivion. The Sangari delegate, a shimmering pillar named Lyrith, pulsed with iridescent protest. Humanity's tools scar the void. We propose a mediated withdrawal, effective immediately. Agreement rippled through the chamber, nods from the avian Thaler, a hiss from the reptilian Drask. Elias straightened, his voice cutting through the din like a laser sight. "Delegates, Earth's not here to conquer or scar. Those rigs pull iridium to build life support for our outposts. Folks breathing recycled air, fighting radiation leaks just to plant the first seeds off-world." He paused, letting the words hang, his tone steady, earnest. No grand speeches, just the grit of it. Crix leaned forward, claws scraping the table. "Sentiment changes nothing. Your seeds poison our cycles." Lena shot Elias a glance, her fingers hovering over the comms. An early plan had been to offer tech-sharing human filtration systems for Zorith biolumens, but the Zorith had dismissed it outright, calling it primitive meddling. Now tension coiled tighter, the chamber's air growing thick. As the debate erupted anew, voices overlapping in a storm of accusations, Elias felt the familiar surge of human resolve. Earth had clawed its way to the stars on ingenuity alone. No empires, just stubborn crews turning scrap into salvation. He glanced at Lena, who gave a wry smile, her wit sparking in her eyes. "Time to end this conversation our way, Captain?" Elias's hand moved to the concealed panel under the table, activating the emergency protocol. The chamber lights dimmed abruptly, holograms stuttering as a low rumble built from the station's core. Gasps echoed, Vexari tentacles flailing, Sangari fracturing light in panic. What followed was no explosion but a calculated surge. Earth's covert engineering team, embedded in the station's maintenance bays, had rerouted power to flood the debate feed with raw data streams, unfiltered sensor logs from the rigs showing zero spore disruption, backed by independent scans from neutral probes. The visuals bloomed across every display, undeniable, washing away the rhetoric like a tidal wave. Crix's mandibles froze mid-click. This is irregular." "Truth often is," Elias replied, his voice calm amid the chaos. The chamber fell silent, delegates poring over the evidence, the Zoritha's bluster crumbling under the weight of facts. But as the light steadied, Elias caught Lena's cautious frown. This gambit had bought them time, but the Concorde's Oversight Committee would investigate the power diversion. A lingering consequence, strained alliances, perhaps even a formal inquiry into human interference. Yet in that moment, with the debate shattered, Earth's voice rang clear, gritty, unyielding, triumphant. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrests of her shuttle seat, the hum of the engines vibrating through her bones as the vessel pierced the outer atmosphere of the neutral station. The view screen flickered with the sprawling dome of the Galactic Concorde's central chamber, a colossal orb of iridescent alloy that housed the representatives of 100 worlds. She'd been briefed a dozen times on the way here, diplomats droning about protocols, alliances, the fragile peace after the Void incursion, but none of it prepared her for the knot in her gut. Earth wasn't just late to this party, they were crashing it uninvited. Beside her, Dr. Kai Ren adjusted his glasses, his fingers tapping a nervous rhythm on his data pad. "Remember, Captain, we're not here to fight. Just to clarify." His voice was steady, but the slight tremor betrayed him. Kai was the brains, the xenolinguist who'd cracked the Concorde's encrypted debates, but out here words were weapons sharper than any railgun. The shuttle docked with a gentle thud, and the hatch hissed open to reveal a corridor lined with hovering sentinels, sleek drones from the Arcturon Collective, their optic lenses whirring as they scanned the arrivals. Ilara stepped out first, her boots clanging against the polished floor, uniform crisp despite the long haul from Seoul. She carried no sidearm. The Concorde forbade it, but she felt naked without the weight. They were escorted in silence to the chamber's antechamber, a vast hall echoing with the murmurs of aides and translators. The air smelled of ozone and alien spices thick enough to chew. Ilara's comm buzzed softly, her second-in-command, Lieutenant Marco Reyes, back on the frigate. "Captain, sensors show the debates heating up. The Krell are pushing for resource quarantine on uncharted sectors. Earth's name keeps coming up." "Understood," she murmured, silencing it. The Krell, those hulking, chitin-armored bureaucrats from the Outer Rim, had been eyeing humanity's expansionist streak since first contact. If they locked down the sectors, Earth's colony ships would starve before they launched. Kai leaned in. "The chamber's about to reconvene. We slip in during the recess, present our petition directly." Ilara nodded, but doubt gnawed at her. Petitions from primitive species like humans were usually shuffled to subcommittees, ignored for cycles. But Director Hale's orders were clear: end the isolationist push or Earth faced economic strangulation. The antechamber doors parted with a resonant chime, admitting them into the chamber proper. It was a cavern of light and shadow, tiered balconies spiraling up to a domed ceiling that simulated a starfield. Thousands of beings occupied the seats: feathered avians from Lyra, gaseous entities in containment fields, silicon-based miners from the Belt worlds. At the center, the podium thrummed with holographic displays, where the presiding counselor, a elongated vexary with iridescent skin, called the session to order. The debate ignited like dry tinder. A Krell emissary lumbered to the floor, its mandibles clicking in rhythmic outrage. The Terrans encroach without sanction. Their vessels seed the void with unchecked replication. Quarantine is mercy, before their greed consumes us all. Murmurs rippled through the assembly, a wave of agreement from the core worlds. Ilara felt Kai tense beside her. They were observers only, relegated to the upper tiers, but the air crackled with hostility. An Etherian delegate rose next, its form a swirl of plasma, voice a melodic hum translated through implants. "Balance demands caution. Humanity's ingenuity is a double-edged blade, progress or peril." Ilara's jaw tightened. Ingenuity? They'd called it that when humans jury-rigged shields from scrap to survive the incursion, saving 3 fleets in the process. But gratitude faded fast in the Concorde's halls. Kai whispered, "Now or never." He activated his datapad, beaming the petition to the central nexus. A bold move, bypassing protocol. The chamber's lights flickered as the data flooded in, holograms stuttering. The vexary counselor paused, its multifaceted eyes narrowing. "Unscheduled transmission from Terra. Explain this intrusion." Ilara stepped forward, ignoring the protocol drones buzzing toward her. Voices hushed, all eyes on the human in the utilitarian jumpsuit amid the finery. "Counselor, delegates, we're not here to debate shadows. Earth's petition isn't a plea, it's evidence." She gestured to the hologram blooming above the podium. Schematics of a new fusion drive, adapted from Krell tech but refined with human modular design. It promised twice the efficiency, no resource drain. The Krell emissary reared, claws scraping stone. Theft. Sabotage of our designs. Adaptation, Elara countered, her voice cutting through the rising clamor. We took what was public domain and made it better. Quarantine that, and you quarantine progress for everyone. The chamber erupted, shouts in a dozen tongues, drones whirring to enforce order. Kai pulled her back as security closed in, but Elara held her ground, heart pounding. This wasn't diplomacy, it was a gauntlet. And Earth wasn't backing down. In the chaos, a side door hissed open. Lieutenant Reyes, somehow planet-side against orders, slipped into the fray, datapad in hand with backup files. Captain, I've got the sims running live. Show them what happens if they lock us out. Elara nodded sharply, the plan shifting on the fly. As the Vexery banged for order, she uploaded the simulation. A projected cascade failure in the quarantine sectors, supply lines collapsing under unadapted tech. The hologram spun to life, stark lines illustrating the domino. Captain Elias Thorne gripped the armrest of his seat in the observation gallery, the polished alloy cool against his sweat-slicked palm. Below, the vast chamber of the Galactic Concorde hummed with escalating voices, a cacophony of alien tongues translated in real time by the earpiece nestled in his canal. The air recyclers struggled against the press of bodies, over 200 delegates from species that had coexisted for millennia, now fracturing over the proposal to quarantine Sol system. Beside him, Dr. Lena Voss leaned forward, her tablet flickering with data streams. They're losing it down there, she murmured, her voice steady but edged with the caution that had defined her career in xenodiplomacy. The Vexery envoy just accused the Quarrens of speciesism. If this boils over, our insertion point vanishes. Thorne nodded, his jaw set. He'd led Marine squads through worse than verbal minefields, but this was uncharted, humanity's first real stake in the stars, barely a decade after first contact. No blasters, no exosuits, just words and wits. His role was backup, a quiet enforcer if things went kinetic, but he hoped it wouldn't. The brass back on Earth had been clear. Observe, adapt, don't escalate. On the chamber floor, the debate ignited like dry tinder. The towering insectoid form of Delegate Crix from the Hive Collective scuttled forward, mandibles clicking in agitation. You presume to bar the humans? They bring unchecked variables, biological, technological. Their history reeks of conquest. The translation lagged a beat, but the holograph above amplified the accusation, projecting archival footage of Earth's wars. Mushroom clouds blooming over oceans, tanks grinding across deserts. A chorus of affirmatives rippled from the fringe world's block, their delegates, slender, bioluminescent beings from gas giants, flickering in agitated patterns. But from the core alliance, Ambassador Lyriel of the Aelori rose, her avian features sharpening. Fear-mongering Crix. Humanity's ingenuity has already stabilized 3 neutral zones. Deny them and you deny progress. Her wings rustled, a subtle display of resolve that sent a hush through her supporters. Thorne's comm buzzed softly, Lena's doing. She tapped her screen, sharing a feed. Look at the vote tallies. It's splitting 60 to 40 against us. If the neutrals swing, we're isolated before we even unpack the fusion cores. He glanced at the human delegation's pod, elevated and stark against the chamber's iridescent walls. Ambassador Reyes stood at the podium, unflinching, her dark hair pulled back in a practical braid. She'd been a negotiator in the unification talks that ended the resource wars. Thorne had read her file. Calm under fire, that's what it said. Now she waited, letting the storm rage. The chamber's central arbiter, a neutral AI construct floating as a sphere of liquid light, intoned, order. The motion stands, quarantine Sol or integrate fully. Speak your final arguments. Crix surged again, his exoskeleton gleaming under the spotlights. Integration invites chaos. Their ingenuity birthed weapons that scarred their own cradle world. What of ours? Murmurs swelled into shouts. A Quarren delegate slammed a tentacle on the console, triggering a holographic burst of protest symbols. The air thickened with pheromones and static, the recyclers whining in overload. Lena shifted, her fingers drumming a cautious rhythm on her knee. Reyes needs to counter now or we're done. Thorn's eyes narrowed. He spotted the subtle shift in Rhea's stance, a slight lean like a fighter coiling. But she didn't speak. Instead, she gestured to her aide, a young analyst named Kai, who patched into the chamber's net. Down below, the holograph flickered. Gone were the war images. In their place, a simple schematic unfolded. A human-engineered habitat module rotating in zero-G, its panels blooming with solar sails like metallic flowers. Data scrolled, yield metrics from asteroid mining ops, 200% efficiency over A-Lorry standards. No fanfare, just facts. The chamber stilled. Crix hesitated, his mandibles parting in confusion. What trickery? Rhea's voice cut through, amplified and even. Not trickery, delegate. Proof. We've shared this tech with the fringe worlds already. Quarantine us and you quarantine your own futures. The bioluminescence pulsed brighter, a wave of reconsideration. Lyriel nodded once, sharply. The Arbiter's light swirled, tallying anew. Thorn exhaled slow. It wasn't over. The neutrals still wavered, and the cost of failure loomed. Earth cut off, innovations bottled up, alliances frayed before they formed. But in that moment, as the debate teetered, he saw the grit in Rhea's eyes. Humanity's edge wasn't in volume. It was in the quiet pivot, the adaptation that turned debate into decision. Lena pocketed her tablet. Clever. But if Crix rallies, we might need that backup plan. Thorn's hand brushed the concealed holster at his belt. Ready when she is. The chamber's tension coiled tighter, the air humming with the weight of worlds hanging in the balance. Captain Elara Voss gripped the armrest of her shuttle seat as the vessel shuddered through the final approach to the Orion Nexus. The stars outside blurred into streaks, the artificial gravity humming faintly beneath her boots. She'd left Earth 6 months ago, a diplomat thrust into the Viper's nest of the Galactic Concord, but nothing prepared her for the summons that had yanked her from the negotiation table on Vega Prime. The shuttle docked with a metallic clang, and Elara stepped into the bustling corridors of the station. Aliens of every stripe hurried past, tentacled bureaucrats from the Korath Collective, crystalline envoys from the Lumari Hive, their forms refracting the overhead lights like living prisms. She adjusted her uniform, the Earth insignia gleaming on her shoulder, and made for the central chamber. Whispers followed her. The humans were late again, unpredictable as always. Inside the vast amphitheater, the air thrummed with tension. Holographic displays flickered with data streams from a dozen worlds, mapping the encroaching anomaly, a rogue singularity drifting toward the core systems, devouring trade routes and outposts alike. The debate had raged for cycles, voices overlapping in a cacophony of translated tongues. Delegate Crix of the Korath slammed a manipulator down on the podium, his iridescent skin flushing purple. We must evacuate the rim worlds. Redirect all fleets to the inner core. The singularity's pull is inexorable, billions will perish if we hesitate. A Lumari shard chimed in opposition, its voice a resonant hum that vibrated through Elara's teeth. Evacuation is folly. Our hive minds calculate a 73% failure rate. Better to harness the anomaly, bend its gravity to shield our borders. The Korath's fear blinds them to opportunity. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Elara slipped into her assigned seat, nodding to her aide Tomas, a wiry engineer with grease-stained fingers even in diplomatic gear. He'd insisted on coming, muttering about fixing things with actual tools, not words. She leaned close. What's the read? They're circling the drain, Tomas whispered, eyes on his datapad. No one's listening. The Vexery rep just proposed sealing off the affected sectors. Abandon the weak, basically. Elara's jaw tightened. Earth colonies dotted those rim worlds. Her own family had roots on New Horizon, now in the Singularity's path. She waited for the floor to open, but the arguments spiraled, each faction digging in deeper. Finally, the moderator, an ancient, floating orb from the Elder Drift, pulsed with light. Earth delegation, your input? Silence fell like a shroud. Elara stood, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. Fellow delegates, we've heard the options. Flee, exploit, isolate. All assume the singularity is a force of nature, untamable. But what if it's not? Crix's eyes narrowed. Human, your species has barely scratched the stars. What hubris to challenge cosmic law. She ignored the barb, activating her holoprojector. A simulation bloomed in the air, a miniature of the anomaly, laced with human-engineered probes data. We've studied it from the outside. Our probes detected fluctuations, patterns in the gravitational waves. It's not random, it's echoing something artificial. Gasps echoed. The Lumari shard tilted, absorbing the light. Impossible. Singularities are primordial relics. Not this one, Elara pressed. Earth's astrophysicists, our team at the Sol Observatory, ran models. The perturbations match a failing containment field. Someone built this or tampered with it. And if it's tech, we can reverse engineer it. Tomas slid her a subtle thumbs up from the sidelines. The chamber erupted anew, but this time eyes turned to her with a mix of skepticism and dawning curiosity. Crix waved a tentacle dismissively. Prove it then. Send your probes deeper. If they fail, your words are dust. Elara met his gaze. Agreed. But we do it together. Share your sensors, your ships. Earth's ingenuity got us here, let's see what the galaxy can add. As the moderator called for a vote on the joint probe mission, Elara felt the shift, a fragile bridge forming amid the chaos. But in the back of her mind, the stakes loomed larger. If they were wrong, the singularity wouldn't just claim worlds. It would unravel the Concord itself. Tomas caught her eye, mouthing, "Told you words matter." She suppressed a smile. This was just the beginning. Captain Elara Voss gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles whitening as the holographic display flickered with incoming data from the derelict station. The chamber's recycled air hummed with the low vibration of the ship's engines, a reminder that they were still light years from help. Beside her, Dr. Kai Ren hunched over his tablet, his fingers flying across the screen, muttering equations under his breath. "The containment field's degrading faster than we thought," he said, his voice steady but edged with fatigue. Across from them, Lieutenant Mira Thorne paced the narrow bridge, her boots thudding softly against the grated floor. She was the cautious one, always double-checking protocols, but now her eyes darted to the viewport where the station loomed like a skeletal hand against the nebula's glow. "We can't afford another breach," Mira said, stopping to lean against the bulkhead. Her dark hair was pulled back tight, accentuating the worry lines etched around her eyes. "Last time we lost half the auxiliary power. If that plasma vent erupts again." She trailed off, glancing at Elara for reassurance that wasn't there. Elara straightened, forcing a nod. She was the brave one, the pilot who'd navigated them through the asteroid field 2 days ago without a scratch. But bravery didn't rewrite physics. "Kai, talk to me. What's the window?" Kai looked up, pushing his glasses higher on his nose. His wit usually lightened these moments, a quip about alien tech being charmingly primitive. But not now. 15 minutes, tops. The rift's pulling in debris, it's like the station's breathing. We jury-rigged the grapples again, but they'll snap under the strain. We need something stronger. The plan had been simple at the start. Dock with the abandoned outpost, salvage the rare isotopes needed to fuel their jump drive, and slip away before the nebula's radiation fried their shields. But the station, a relic from some long-extinct species, had other ideas. Its automated defenses had activated mid-approach, forcing them to improvise a bypass that drained their reserves. Now, with the isotopes just beyond that unstable chamber, failure meant stranding here, slow death by cosmic decay. Mira crossed her arms. "We pull back, run silent. Wait for the field to stabilize. And waste days?" Elara shot back, her voice sharper than intended. Tension coiled in her chest. They weren't just crew, they were family, forged in the Academy's brutal sims. Arguing felt like betrayal. "Those isotopes are our ticket home. The colony's counting on us." Kai tapped his tablet, pulling up a schematic that rotated in holographic blue. A jagged line marked the plasma vent, pulsing like a vein. "She's right about the weight, but Elara's got the stakes. Look here, the vent's cyclic. If we time it." The ship shuddered suddenly, a deep groan echoing through the hull. Alarms blared, red lights strobing across the bridge. Mira lunged for her station. "Debris impact. Shields at 60%. Elara's hands flew to the controls, stabilizing their orbit with a series of micro-thrusts. The viewport filled with tumbling rocks, fragments from the station's outer shell. One grazed the hull, sparks flaring briefly outside. Heart pounding, she glanced at Kai. Your cycle, how long? 3 minutes between pulses. He wiped sweat from his brow. We go in hot, deploy the new anchors I fabbed from the spare plating. Risky, but it could hold. Mira hesitated, then nodded. Together, then. No heroics. Elara engaged the thrusters, the ship lurching forward into the nebulous swirling haze. The station grew larger, its corridors a labyrinth of shadow and light. As they closed in, the vent's glow intensified, a furnace mouth waiting to swallow them whole. Elara's mind raced. Ingenuity had gotten them this far, but one wrong move and the stars would claim another ship. Captain Elara Voss gripped the armrest of her shuttle seat, the hum of the engines vibrating through her bones as they hurtled toward the Orion arm's edge. Beside her, Dr. Kai Ren muttered calculations under his breath, his fingers dancing over a holographic display flickering with erratic readouts. The third member of their trio, Lieutenant Mira Sol, stared out the viewport at the swirling nebula ahead, a toxic veil that had claimed dozens of survey ships before theirs even approached. This haze isn't just radiation, Mira said, her voice steady despite the sweat beading on her forehead. It's alive. Sensors are picking up biosignals. Elara nodded, her jaw set in that unyielding line her crew knew meant no backing down. She'd always been the anchor, the one who pushed forward when caution screamed retreat. Alive or not, we need those core samples. Without them, the colony's life support fails in weeks. The stakes hung heavy. Back on New Terra, families waited, rationing air and water while the Council dithered over aid. This nebula hid the rare isotopes they needed, Earth's last gamble after the core collapse stripped their homeworld bare. Kai glanced up, his witty edge dulled by fatigue. My plan was solid. Microdrones to breach the outer layer, grab and go. But the interference fried the first batch. We're flying blind now. He tapped the console, pulling up a grainy feed from the surviving probe. It showed tendrils of glowing plasma weaving through the gas clouds, pulsing like veins. Mira leaned in, her cautious nature kicking in. We aboard. Send word to the fleet, let the Krell handle it with their shields. The Krell, those hulking allies with their impenetrable hulls, had promised support but arrived late as always. Elara shot her a look. And owe them the colony? No. We adapt. She unstrapped, moving to the pilot's yoke with deliberate calm. The shuttle bucked as they entered the nebula's fringe, colors shifting from violet to sickly green across the hull. Alarms blared suddenly, red lights strobing the cabin. Hull breach imminent, the AI intoned flatly. Kai cursed, scrambling to seal compartments. The tendrils they're latching on. Magnetic fields pulling us in. Elara wrestled the controls, engines roaring against the drag, but the shuttle spun, caught in a current that no human ship was built to fight. Mira braced against the bulkhead, firing thrusters manually from her station. Elara, pull up, now. Through the chaos, Elara spotted it. A narrow gap in the plasma web, a fleeting shadow amid the glow. Her mind raced, piecing together Kai's earlier scans. Kai, reroute power to the deflector array. Overload it, make a pulse. He hesitated, eyes wide. That could fry our systems. Do it, she snapped, voice cutting through the din like a blade. The pulse erupted, a shockwave rippling outward. The tendrils recoiled, the shuttle lurching free, but not without cost. Sparks flew from the console, and the engines coughed, dropping them into free fall toward a denser cloud. Myra's hands flew over repairs, patching what she could. We're leaking Atmo. 10 minutes tops. Elara steadied the ship, her knuckles white. The core loomed closer, a jagged asteroid wreathed in the bioplasma, promising salvation or doom. As they stabilized, Kai slumped back, a grim smile cracking his face. Clever. But now what? We're committed. Elara met their eyes, the weight of command settling deeper. We dive in. Together. The nebula whispered against the hull, its secrets unfolding in deadly invitation. Captain Elara Voss gripped the edge of the negotiation table, her knuckles whitening against the polished obsidian surface. The chamber's holographic display flickered with data streams from a dozen worlds, each one a testament to the escalating crisis. The Zorathian fleet had blockaded the neutral trade lanes, starving the outer colonies of vital antimatter fuel. Without it, ships ground to a halt, and entire systems teetered on blackout. Ilara's team, her sharp-tongued engineer, Marcus Hale, and the cautious diplomat from the allied vexery Lyra, had spent hours crafting a compromise. But now, as the alien delegates shouted over each other, that plan unraveled like frayed wiring. The Zorathians claimed divine right to those lanes, bellowed the hulking representative from the Grun Collective, his tusks quivering with indignation. Your human vessels encroach on sacred paths. Yield or face the void's wrath. Lyra leaned toward Ilara, her iridescent scales shifting uneasily. They're stalling. If we don't counter now, the blockade tightens by dawn. Our probe data shows they're rerouting their own shipments, profiting from the chaos. Marcus snorted softly, his fingers dancing over a concealed data pad. Profit or not, their shields are paper-thin against our phased arrays. One good push and, quiet, Ilara hissed, though a spark of grim amusement lit her eyes. She straightened, her voice cutting through the din like a laser sight. Esteemed delegates, enough. The Zorathians' sacred paths were mapped by our joint surveys a century ago. Divine right? That's a convenient rewrite when your coffers run dry. The chamber hushed, then erupted anew. A slender Ilari envoy rose, her tentacles waving in agitation. Human arrogance. You propose rerouting all traffic through your soul relay? That's not compromise, it's conquest masked as aid. Ilara felt the weight of it then, the invisible currents pulling everyone under. Their initial plan, to offer shared access to Earth's fusion tech in exchange for lifting the blockade, had seemed airtight. But the Grun had leaked falsified logs painting humans as aggressors, and now half the council bayed for sanctions. Marcus's hack into the Zorathian comms had confirmed it. A rival faction within the fleet was pulling strings, hoping to ignite a war for territorial gain. If they failed here, the outer colonies would fracture, and Earth's nascent alliance with the Vexery would shatter. Lyra placed a tentative hand on Ilara's arm. Captain, the vote's turning. We need to pivot, reveal the leak without accusing outright. Ilara nodded, her mind racing through contingencies. She activated her wrist comm, signaling Marcus to feed the altered data stream. No outright lies, just the truth sharpened like a blade. Look closer at those logs, she said, projecting the holographic overlay. The chamber's lights dimmed as the display bloomed, revealing timestamp discrepancies glowing like fresh welds. Gasps rippled through the assembly. The Ilari envoy recoiled, her tentacles coiling. Fabrication? But the signatures, authentic, Ilara interjected smoothly, her tone steady as hull plating. Cross-verified against Vexery archives. The Zorathians' own admirals authorized the diversions. Not divine will but desperation. The Grun delegate slammed a fist down, cracking the table's edge. Lies. Your ingenuity twists facts like you twist metal. Marcus leaned in from his seat, his voice a low rumble. Twist? We're the ones who built the relays that keep your fleets flying. Without us, you'd be adrift. He tapped his pad, and a simulation unfolded. Zorathian ships grinding to a halt, their blockade collapsing under fuel shortages of their own making. Tension coiled tighter, the air thick with unspoken threats. Lyra whispered urgently, they're signaling their fleet, preparing to withdraw delegates. Ilara's heart pounded, but she kept her gaze level. This was the backfire they'd feared. Exposing the leak might force a vote, but it could also isolate Earth, branding them meddlers. She glanced at Marcus, who gave a subtle nod. His secondary protocol was armed, a risky EMP burst to jam Zorathian signals if talks collapsed. But that would mean escalation, lives on the line. Delegates, Ilara said, rising fully now, her shadow stretching across the chamber like a solar flare. Debate has served its purpose. The evidence speaks. Lift the blockade, share the lanes, or watch your sacred paths become graves for all. The chamber fell silent, save for the hum of holograms. The Zorathian envoy, a gaunt figure cloaked in shimmering robes, met her eyes for the first time. In that gaze, Ilara saw the crack, the fear of exposure tipping toward surrender. But as murmurs swelled again, she knew the real fight was just beginning. One wrong word and the fragile piece would ignite. The dim hum of the chamber's recyclers filled the air, a constant reminder that breathable atmosphere was no longer a given. Alex Rivera leaned against the console, his fingers tracing the edge of a holographic display that flickered with erratic data streams. The plan had seemed solid back on the shuttle: reroute power from the auxiliary engines to stabilize the core breach. But now, with the station's corridors twisting like a labyrinth of failing bulkheads, doubt gnawed at him. Lena's voice crackled over the comm, sharp and edged with caution. Alex, readings show the surge is destabilizing the outer hull. If we push more juice through, we might seal the breach, but the engines could fry completely. We're blind out here without propulsion. He glanced at Zorith, the Krellian engineer whose iridescent scales shifted from calm blue to agitated violet under the emergency lights. The alien's multifaceted eyes narrowed, mandibles clicking in what Alex had learned was frustration. Human, your ingenuity is unpredictable. My people calculated a 72% failure rate on this bypass. Why ignore the safer evacuation protocol? Zoritha's voice buzzed through the translator, laced with the weight of a species that valued precision over risk. Because evacuating means leaving half the crew behind, Alex shot back, his voice steady despite the sweat beading on his brow. The chamber around them shuddered, a low groan echoing from the vents as another pressure wave rippled through the structure. Ilara, the avian diplomat from the fringe worlds, perched on a nearby strut, her feathers ruffled and eyes wide. She had been the one to suggest allying with the humans in the first place, her cautious optimism a counterpoint to Zoritha's skepticism. Now she tilted her head, talons gripping the metal. The debate in the core chamber grows louder. They argue for abandonment, but if your fix works, it silences them all. Fail and we're the fools who doomed the alliance. Alex nodded, pulling up the schematic on his wrist pad. The image bloomed in the air between them, a web of conduits pulsing red where the sabotage, likely from the rival syndicate, had weakened the shields. The external challenge wasn't just the breach, it was the isolation. No rescue fleet could reach them in time through the nebula's interference, and resources dwindled with every cycle. Oxygen at 68%, power reserves dipping below critical. He could feel the stakes in his chest, a tight coil of responsibility for the mixed crew of humans, Krellians, and avians who'd trusted Earth's grit to pull them through. All right, we adapt, Alex said, his mind racing through the failures of the initial attempt. The first bypass had sparked a feedback loop, nearly venting the engineering bay. But watching the patterns now, he spotted it, a harmonic resonance in the auxiliary lines, something the alien algorithms had overlooked because they didn't account for improvised damping. Humans had jury-rigged worse on frontier outposts. Lena, throttle the surge to 40% and sync it with the station's rotation cycle. It'll mask the overload. Her response came quick, laced with grit. Copy that. But if this backfires, I'm blaming your cowboy diagnostics. A pause, then the faint whir of relays engaging over the line. Zorith stepped closer, his bulk casting a shadow across the console. This is not protocol. The chamber erupts even now. Your Earth's representative ended their last transmission with defiance. They call it reckless. But there was a flicker in his scales, a hint of curiosity overriding doubt. The station lurched again, harder this time, sending Ilara fluttering to steady herself. Alarms blared, red lights strobing across the walls. Alex gripped the console as the holographic breach indicator widened, a jagged tear in the digital hull mirroring the real one beyond the viewport, a swirling maw of vacuum pulling at the stars. Hold on, he muttered, initiating the sync. The air grew thick, recyclers straining, and for a heartbeat, everything hung in balance. Then, a different sound, a steadying hum. The reading stabilized, the red lines fading to amber. Lena's voice broke through, triumphant but breathless. It's holding. Breach sealed at 92%. But engines are at 23%. We've got thrust, barely, but it'll cost us speed to the rendezvous. Zoritha's mandibles parted in what might have been a grin. Impossible. Your adaptation, it worked. Ilara let out a trill, her feathers smoothing as relief washed over her. But Alex's gaze lingered on the viewport, where the nebula loomed darker now, its tendrils hinting at the syndicate's next move. The fix had bought them time, but the cost lingered, a strained alliance, a crew pushed to their limits, and the chamber's debate far from over. Earth's conversation, it seemed, had only just begun. Captain Elena Vasquez gripped the console, her knuckles whitening against the hum of the shuttle's engines. The void outside the viewport stretched infinite, stars pinpricks against the black, but her focus narrowed to the blinking alert on the NAV screen. "Radiation spike incoming," she muttered, voice steady despite the sweat beading on her forehead. Beside her, Dr. Liam Chen adjusted his visor, his cautious fingers hovering over the manual override. "We push through or we abort. Your call, Elena." The chamber's debate felt like lifetimes ago, endless arguments in the Galactic Concord's vaulted halls, where species bickered over protocols while the anomaly grew. That swirling rift in space-time, birthing tendrils of energy that warped reality itself, threatened to swallow 3 systems. The Krell had demanded evacuation fleets. The Vexery pushed for diplomatic overtures to whatever lay beyond. Earth, through Elena's unyielding testimony, had cut the noise. "We go in. We fix it." Now, with the shuttle slicing toward the anomaly's edge, regret tasted metallic on her tongue. A low groan echoed through the hull as the first wave hit. Alarms wailed, red lights painting the cabin in bloody hues. Liam cursed, slamming the stabilizers. "Shields at 60%. If we don't vent the excess, it'll fry the core." Elena's mind raced, traits honed from frontier runs kicking in, brave, not reckless. She punched coordinates into the auxiliary drive, a jury-rigged human hack using the shuttle's water recyclers to generate a magnetic buffer. "Reroute the life support. It'll buy us 30 seconds. From the back, Zara the Krell engineer rumbled her dissent, her scaled hide rippling under the strain. Witty in counsel, cautious here, she clutched a toolkit like a lifeline. "Human improvisation? This is why your species alarms me. One breach and we're plasma." But she moved anyway, tentacles flying over panels, her actions betraying trust earned in the chamber's chaos. The shuttle bucked, a metallic screech tearing through as the buffer engaged. Elena felt the deck tilt, her stomach lurching with it. 30 seconds stretched eternal. The anomaly loomed, a vortex of fractured light, pulling at the ship like greedy fingers. Liam's voice cracked over the comm, probes show the rift stabilized on the far side, barely. "If we thread it wrong?" He trailed off, eyes on Elena. She nodded, jaw set. "We thread it right." With a deep breath, she engaged the thrusters, the shuttle diving into the maw. Inside, reality smeared. Colors bled into impossible shades. Time stuttered, echoes of past jumps replaying in whispers. Zara's toolkit clattered, tools floating in zero-G defiance. "Holding," she growled, securing a loose panel with a swift clamp. Elena wrestled the controls, sweat stinging her eyes, every nerve alight with the grit that had silenced the chamber. The plan's early failure, the initial probe's meltdown, had nearly derailed them, but adaptation was human currency. They emerged on the other side, the shuttle spinning wild into calmer space. Alarms quieted to a murmur, shields flickered back to green. Liam exhaled, slumping. "We're through. But the core's overheating, won't last the return." Elena scanned the readouts, spotting the anomaly's heart, a crystalline lattice, pulsing erratically, the source of the rifts. "Then we don't return empty-handed," she said, voice laced with that earnest fire. Zara's eyes gleamed, a rare Krell smile cracking her scales. "Your end to the debate might just save us all." But as they approached, a new alert pierced the calm, a secondary rift blooming behind them, chasing like a predator. The cost loomed: fix the core or lose the galaxy's faith forever. Elena's hand steadied on the yoke. Teamwork had gotten them here, cleverness would get them home. Captain Ilera Voss gripped the armrests of her command chair, the hum of the shuttle's engines vibrating through her bones like a distant storm. The viewport ahead framed the jagged silhouette of the asteroid belt, a graveyard of shattered rock tumbling in lazy orbits around the gas giant's pull. Her team, Dr. Kai Ren, the sharp-tongued engineer with grease-streaked fingers, and Lieutenant Mira Solis, ever the steadfast pilot with her unyielding calm, huddled over the holographic display flickering between them. "They're closing in," Mira said, her voice steady as she tapped coordinates into the NAV console. Red blips swarmed the projection. The rival clan's scout drones, sleek predators designed by the Vexery to outmaneuver anything in the void. The clan's claim on the rare mineral veins here had sparked the standoff, but now it was personal. Ilara's earlier feint had drawn them out, only for their jamming field to scramble her signals back to the fleet. Kai leaned forward, his eyes narrowing at the schematics. We adapt or we drift into that debris field. The shuttle's shields can take a hit, but not from their plasma lances. He wiped sweat from his brow, the cabin's recycled air thick with tension. Outside, the asteroid's shadow eclipsed a star, casting fleeting darkness over the controls. Ilara nodded, her mind racing through the options they'd burned through already. The initial plan, deploy decoy beacons to lure the drones away, had backfired when the Vexery adapted faster than expected, turning the traps against her own sensors. Now, with fuel reserves dipping low and the fleet hours out, the stakes pressed like the belt's gravitational crush. One wrong vector, and they'd be pulverized remnants feeding the void. Override the auxiliary thrusters, Ilara decided, her tone clipped but firm. Kai, rig the cargo bay vents to vent plasma residue, make it look like we're leaking core coolant. It'll draw them in close. Myra's fingers flew across the panel, doubt flickering in her eyes for the first time. That close? If they don't buy it, they will, Kai interrupted, already pulling panels from the bulkhead, wires spilling like entrails. His hands moved with the precision of someone who jury-rigged life support on a dying station. Sparks danced as he spliced circuits, the acrid scent of melting insulation sharpening the air. Humans don't fight fair, we fight smart. The first drone appeared on sensors, a needle-thin shadow slicing through the belt's dust. Ilara watched it approach, her pulse syncing with the shuttle's rhythmic pulses. Mira eased them toward a cluster of spinning boulders, the larger ones looming like ancient monoliths etched by cosmic winds. The ploy took hold, the drone veered, signaling others, their formation tightening like a noose. They're biting, Mira murmured, banking hard to skim a fragment's edge. The shuttle groaned, inertial dampeners straining as they threaded the needle between rocks. Kai sealed the last connection, and with a shudder, the vents belched a plume of ionized gas, glowing faintly against the black. The lead drone dove in, scanners probing the breach. Ilara counted heartbeats, 3, 2, then triggered the sequence. Kai's hack pulsed through the shuttle's array, a virus born of scavenged Vexery code, latching onto the drone's systems. It jerked, light strobing erratically, before exploding in a silent bloom of fire that lit the viewport in orange hues. Chain reaction rippled outward. The swarm faltered, drones colliding in the confusion, their debris adding to the belt's chaos. Mira hooped softly, pulling them clear as the last pursuer spiraled into a boulder, shattering into glittering shards that rained across the stars. But victory tasted bittersweet. Ilara scanned the readouts, hull integrity at 60%, and the fleet's response was still static. The mineral claim hung in balance, but the cost gnawed. Kai's rig had drained their emergency power, leaving them vulnerable to the next wave. As the gas giant swelled on the horizon, its storms swirling like vengeful eyes, Ilara leaned back, the weight of command settling heavier than the debris field behind them. "Patch me through to command," she said, voice resolute. "Tell them we've bought time, but we need that backup now." Mira complied, the comms crackling to life at last, while Kai slumped against the wall, a weary grin cracking his face. In the void's unforgiving embrace, their ingenuity had carved a path forward, but the belt whispered of trials yet to come. The dim hum of the council chamber's life support systems filled the air like a distant heartbeat, underscoring the weight of every word exchanged among the delegates. Captain Elena Vasquez leaned forward in her seat, her fingers drumming a silent rhythm on the armrest of the human envoy's podium. Across the vast, curving table, the Zorathian ambassador's tentacles writhed in agitation, their iridescent tips flickering with bioluminescent frustration. Beside Elena sat Dr. Kai Rin, the xenobiologist whose quick mind had already unraveled half the puzzle of the nebula's volatile core, his glasses perpetually fogged from the recycled air. Their third companion, the stoic Krell engineer named Vor, stood like a shadowed monolith at the chamber's edge, his armored exoskeleton reflecting the holographic displays that swirled with data streams. The debate had dragged into its third cycle, voices overlapping in a cacophony of translated tongues. The Zorathians pushed for evacuation, abandon the mining outpost on the nebula's fringe, let the stellar storms claim it, and regroup light years away. Our simulations predict cascade failure, the ambassador hissed through the comms, their voice a wet rasp. Your human persistence blinds you to the inevitable. Elena shot a glance at Kai, who shook his head subtly, his eyes locked on the latest readings. The storms weren't natural. Something in the nebula's magnetic fields was amplifying, drawing energy from the outpost reactors like a parasite. Their initial plan, to deploy shielding drones and reroute power, had backfired spectacularly an hour ago, when the first wave of drones shorted out, feeding the anomaly instead of starving it. Vor shifted, his gravelly voice cutting through the din without amplification. Blinds? You flee shadows while the light source burns unchecked. The Krell's words landed like stones in still water, rippling silence across the chamber. Elena appreciated the backup. Vor's clan had lost the outpost to similar anomalies decades back, forging his caution into something unyielding. But even he knew they were stalling. The real risk gnawed at her. The human crew still aboard the outpost, 30 souls including her own brother Marco, who refused to leave his post until the last possible second. If they didn't act soon, the storms would tear through the hulls like paper. Kai leaned in, whispering just loud enough for her earpiece. The feedback loop, it's resonant. If we invert the reactor's phase we could disrupt it, but it'll take manual overrides from inside. His plan was a gamble, born of late-night simulations back on the shuttle. Elena nodded, her jaw tightening. Manual meant suits in the storm, radiation spikes that could fry neural implants. She stood, silencing the chamber with a raised hand. Ambassador, your evacuation saves lives today but dooms tomorrow. The nebula's instability spreads. We've tracked tendrils reaching your trade routes already. Projections bloomed on the central holos, red veins snaking toward Zorathian space. Murmurs erupted, but Elena pressed on, her voice steady. We're not persisting blindly. We're adapting. Send your engineers with ours, joint op, shared risk. The Zorathian ambassador recoiled, tentacles coiling tight. You presume alliance after your drones nearly ignited the core? Accusations flew, delegates from neutral worlds piping in with calls for more data, more time. Vor growled low, stepping forward as if to physically block the descent. Elena felt the pressure build, her mind racing through contingencies. Kai's fingers flew over his datapad, tweaking models on the fly, but doubt flickered in his eyes, the kind that came from knowing one wrong variable could end them all. Outside, through the viewport, the nebula churned, a colossal eye of plasma watching, waiting for their fracture. As the chamber's lights dimmed for the voting phase, Elena caught Vor's gaze, a silent pact forming. They wouldn't wait for consensus. Kai slipped a comms beacon into her pocket, its weight a promise of connection amid the chaos. The vote tallied slowly, favors teetering, but Elena already knew, if the council balked they'd launch the op rogue. Marco's voice crackled faintly over a private channel. Sis, we're holding but the bulkheads are groaning. She clenched her fist, the earnest pull of duty overriding the fear. The storm wouldn't claim them without a fight. The chamber's vast dome hummed with the low thrum of alien machinery, its walls pulsing like the veins of some colossal beast. Ambassador Lyra of the Vexery leaned forward, her iridescent scales flickering under the artificial lights, her voice a cascade of chittering urgency. Earth's proposal is reckless. To divert the nebula's core energy without consensus, it's not innovation, it's sabotage. The Accord demands unity, not this human audacity. Around the circular table, representatives from a dozen worlds shifted uneasily. The air was thick with translated pheromones and holographic projections, swirling data streams depicting the rogue nebula's inexorable drift toward the core systems. It threatened to unleash plasma storms that could scour entire sectors, wiping out trade routes and habitats alike. 4 months, the Galactic Accord had bickered in this very chamber, each faction proposing half measures. Shields that drained resources, evacuations that left billions behind. Now, with the deadline hours away, Earth's delegate, Captain Elias Thorne, sat unmoved, his weathered face a mask of quiet resolve. Thorn's fingers drummed once on the arm of his chair, a human tick that drew sidelong glances from the synthetics and gas-form envoys. He'd come alone, backed by nothing but a battered datapad and the unyielding grit of his species. No entourage, no fanfare, just the plain truth of what humans had endured on their fragile blue world. Reckless? He echoed, his voice steady, cutting through the din like a knife through fog. We've rerouted asteroids that could have cracked our moon in two. We've tamed black holes for fuel when your Accords were still debating ethics. This isn't audacity, Lyra. It's survival. For all of us. Murmurs rippled outward. Kale, the burly rock-skinned delegate from Gorith, slammed a fist on the table, cracking the synth marble. And what of the cost? Your plan overloads the Nexus relays. Worlds like mine on the edge get fried first. His eyes, like glowing coals, bored into Thorn. Kale had been an ally in quieter talks, his caution a counterweight to Thorn's boldness, but fear had frayed that bond. Thorn met the gaze without flinching. He activated his datapad, projecting a crisp simulation, human-engineered probes swarming the nebula's heart, their fusion cores pulsing in sync to siphon and redirect the energy flow. No grand armadas, just clever redirects. Mirrors of salvaged hull plating to bend plasma streams, AI algorithms born from Earth's chaotic weather models to predict and harness the chaos. The relays hold if we sequence it right. We've tested it on our own sun flares. Gorith gets priority shielding from the backlash. No one gets left behind. Lyra's mandibles clicked in disbelief. Tested? On your backwater star? This is the Accord's lifeblood at stake. She gestured wildly, summoning her own holo display, a chaotic web of failure probabilities, red warnings flashing like arterial blood. The chamber erupted then, voices overlapping in a symphony of discord. The avian churix trilling accusations of imperialism, the silicon-based Korix emitting static bursts of logical rebuttals. Thorn stood, not shouting but letting the noise wash over him like a storm he'd weathered before. On Earth, debates in orbital stations had turned to brawls over less, but he'd learned to wait to let the cracks in opposition show themselves. As the chaos peaked, a low alarm pierced the air, the nebula's vanguard tendrils brushing the outer relays, sensors screaming imminent cascade. Gasps echoed, even the stoic Korix flickered in alarm. Lyra froze, her scales paling to ash gray. Thorn didn't hesitate. Vote now or we all burn. His words weren't a plea but a fact delivered with the calm of someone who'd stared down extinctions and walked away scarred but standing. The chamber fell silent, the weight of decision pressing like gravity. Kale rumbled first, his massive hand hovering over the consensus node. For Gorith, I. One by one the others followed. Lyra last, her eyes narrowing but yielding to the inevitable. Thorn nodded once, initiating the sequence from his pad. Far across the void, human ships, sleek, unassuming vessels crewed by engineers with calloused hands and unquenchable drive, sprang into action. The nebula shuddered, its fury bent not broken, redirected into a harmless flare that lit the stars like a controlled dawn. Back in the chamber, as cheers mixed with wary relief, Thorn felt the subtle pull of fatigue in his bones. The Accord was saved, but trust would need rebuilding, alliances mended with the grit of follow-through. He glanced at the viewport where Earth's distant sun twinkled, a reminder that ingenuity wasn't born in isolation, but in the fire of necessity, shared or not. Lyra approached as the session dissolved, her voice softer now, laced with reluctant respect. You ended it, human. But next time, we debate as equals from the start. Thorn smiled faintly, the lines around his eyes deepening. That's the idea. As he stepped into the corridor, the chamber's hum faded behind him, the galaxy a little safer, a little wiser, for now.